Welcome to the Diverse Minds podcast, where we give you the tips, tools and techniques you need to be a mentally healthy and inclusive leader. Each week, you'll hear about a variety of topics linked to mental health, wellbeing and diversity that will enhance both your professional practice and personal wellbeing. Welcome to the 71st episode of the Diverse Minds podcast. And on today's episode, I'm going to be talking about what I think 2021 will hold in terms of workplace well-being. The last time I did my predictions was in 2019, so I thought maybe it was a good time to predict well-being trends in the workplace again, especially given the tumultuous time we've had, and what might need to look different going forward. So in 2019, what were my predictions? And I'll link to the show notes to the blog. But in essence, I predicted the first thing was resilience, and that's on an individual level. The second was around measuring the impact. So how organisations who have invested significantly into training their staff on mental health and wellbeing and relevant policies really needed to monitor things, building on the way in which the Deloitte monitoring report in 2017 did, looking at workplace investment and the effectiveness of mental health first aid training. The third thing was tailored training for all roles in organisations and businesses. So thinking about who needs what specific training depending on their role within a business. The fourth thing was supporting international staff in relation specifically to Brexit, so focus on EU citizens, but also international staff with an increasing hostile environment. And the fifth thing was communication training to reduce workplace conflict. And I don't think we have seen as much of that really as we should have done, but how conflict reduces mental well-being in the workplace and how providing that is very helpful. And then my final prediction was about technology to support well-being at work. And I think, of course, there was some technology, but that is going to be more increasingly important. So a mixed bag, and clearly I've given it 2 years, so not being able to track those really well. But I think it's useful to consider where we are headed and how the workplace is changing for good, even if 90% of workplaces decide that their employees are vaccinated. And I don't think we're going to be seeing offices looking the same. And I think it's super important to consider this because well-being, mental health is not static, it changes. Of course, it depends on governmental policies, it depends on the type of roles that people are doing. We may potentially see more manufacturing again in this country based on what's happened with Brexit. We don't really know what those deals look like in detail, or I certainly don't have a sense of what that deal looks like in great detail. So who knows? And in order to be able to cater and make sure that staff feel supported, this is absolutely essential to do. And as I talk, you might think it's useful to consider training options. So don't forget that, as always, I've included my online form that you can fill out to help you consider what might be useful to you, either to do for yourself, or if you want to send it in to me to have a conversation, you absolutely have the option to do that as well. So what do I think what are my workplace wellbeing predictions for 2021? Well, the first thing I think is around psychological risk assessments. Now, of course, these aren't new. They are related to health and safety. So where you have risk assessments for physical and environmental risks, I always talk about having psychological risks also assessed. Now, this is for anyone. This is not specifically for anyone who would be classified as having a psychological quote unquote issue, or someone who's experiencing mental ill health, whether it's acute or chronic. This is for everyone because, of course, the workplace can exacerbate or create psychological risks for us. And it also links with health and safety at home. So in November, I was part of the Health and Safety Lone Working Conference, and there was a lot of discussion about this and how actually if you are walking down your stairs and you trip, that wouldn't normally have been considered a work issue. But if you're walking down the stairs to get to your computer to start work or for any other reason, because we're working at home, this might impact on health and safety. Of course, if you have an accident, that's likely to impact on your mental health and well-being. For a short time, it could be shock, it could be fear, anything at all. So for me, one of the first things is psychological risk assessments coming to the forefront, becoming really important, not being seen as a bolt-on and really integrated into that health and safety aspect at large. The second thing I predict is more digital support and therapy, specifically around bereavement. Now, of course, it's with a very heavy heart that we have seen the death toll in the UK go up. And of course, people in the UK also have family in different parts of the world. And most places are seeing an increase in coronavirus cases, and it's becoming increasingly challenging. So I really think, given the fact that most of the country at the moment is in tier 4 or higher tier, and their restrictions, that digital support is essential, and therapy specifically around bereavement. And my hope, I don't necessarily think this will happen, but my hope is very much that this bereavement therapy will also be centered on culture and cultural requirements. Because of course, with the restrictions, as I've mentioned before, many communities are not able to fulfill their cultural or religious burial rights and responsibilities and requirements as they would be able to do during non-COVID times. So that therapy needs to be there, absolutely, needs to be provided within the workplace as well as through other third sector and medical organisations and routes. But it needs to centre potentially on bereavement as well, and how that makes people feel in the whole gamut and perspective around bereavement. So for some people it could be relief, but again it will bring up other feelings and sensations. And to really have very intelligent therapies and conversations around bereavement and that digital support. The third one is training for managers to spot signs of mental ill health remotely. Now, I say this because this does keep coming up, and I really hope that it will be a trend. And I know that managers are struggling. And managers, having been one myself, a middle manager, is you're managing a team and you really want to make sure that their well-being is okay and that they're looked after. But you're also managing upwards in terms of how you report to your managers, whether you can talk about your own mental health and well-being, and also meeting your job requirements. So I think being able to spot the signs of mental ill health, we got there with lots of conversations earlier on, but now how to spot this remotely and also to how to have those conversations. So I think very specific training for managers on spotting the signs of mental ill health in a remote environment, and also how to have those conversations. And some tips include things like, if someone is distressed, saying to them, would you like to continue this video call? Or I tell you what, would you like to have a discussion on another medium, either the phone, or I'll give you 5 minutes, and then if I don't hear from you, I'll phone you back. So of course, it's very similar route as it would be face-to-face, but it's got that different flavour because of course, it's through video calls. Some people feel more comfortable, some people feel less comfortable. And I think training for that is going to be essential, and adapting to the environment where it looks less and less likely that we're going to be face-to-face very soon. The fourth one is about financial wellbeing support. So particularly around financial literacy and how it relates to well-being. Now, finances and well-being are absolutely intrinsic. We need money. We need enough money to be able to be comfortable and to know that we've got enough and we're not just living from paycheck to paycheck, because that is incredibly stressful. And also employees not being aware of if their jobs are going to be cut, if they're going to be made redundant. So there needs to be a lot of intelligence about this. And I think it will have to come to the fore. Furlough, the furlough program has been extended till April. But in the meantime, that doesn't mean that people aren't struggling. And it also doesn't mean that businesses aren't struggling, because the government top up, I believe it's a certain amount, so 30% from employers. So financial literacy, thinking about how finance is linked to well-being, and encouraging employees to look at their debt profiles and getting them that support, and potentially also family interventions or family conversations that can be had in terms of employee assistance program. So I think that is something that is absolutely is going to be even more important than it has been in the past, and hopefully will destigmatize the conversation and get people to talk about it more. Now, in 2019, you'll have heard that I predicted resilience as well, so resilience, but now I'm going to talk about resilience again for 2021, but potentially more at an organizational level, rather than just looking at the resilience of an individual. And what do I mean by this? I think it's looking at resilience of the workforce, if people are off sick with COVID or with mental ill health or anything else. It could be slips and trips or things that are happening from not being on the top of their game with health and safety. technology. So I think there's that element of resilience. I think it's also to do with resilience financially. So how organizations look at their resilience to pay staff, to adapt and to change, and how this relates to the overall well-being and culture of a company. Of course, I'm just wanting to mention RAW here as well. So Wellbeing and Resilience at Work, the psychometric tool that can really help organizations, teams and individuals benchmark where they are in terms of resilience and put in actions in place. So we're thinking about resilience at a systemic level, a team level and an individual level, which is slightly different to my prediction in 2019, which was simply about the individual. I think we do need to think more about organizational and systemic resilience to build planning in and to help every level of an organization with reducing ambiguity and therefore increasing mental health and well-being. And then finally, work-life balance. So this is all about the demarcation or trying to create demarcation between home and life in general. And we know this has been super stressful for all of us through the last 9-10 months. And yet it's looking like it's not going to change given the tears at the moment in January 2021 and the debate about whether schools should stay open, and many parents, carers and adults are going to be homeschooling again. So yes, I think employers, you're going to have to, I really hope I see this, I hope it is going to be a trend to think about work-life balance, what that looks like, how everyone's work-life balance signature is different. And don't forget about my mentally healthy professional course, the work-life balance online course that you can do in your own time for people who don't have time to really consider work-life balance. So it's really quick, they're 4 modules, and it will help you break things down. So that might be something that's useful to help you with this workplace wellbeing trend. So what I'd say is maybe some of these trends you're already doing or you think that they're useful is to start with the end in mind. And what kind of workplace, team or organization do you want your workplace to be given this difficult time, and tailor options to them? What's worked in the past during non-COVID times is unlikely to work in the same way now. So how might you adapt and change them? And so I think there's going to be more focus on psychological risks, looking at digital therapy for bereavement and also ongoing and coping, specific training for managers to spot the signs of mental ill health remotely, that financial well-being support as a package, as an online training program, and getting people to talk about it and destigmatize it, looking at systemic resilience and work-life balance for absolutely every level in the business. So I really hope you found this episode useful about the trends, and I'd love to help you if you would want to take any of these ideas forward. So please use the form that I've created, the Google form, and the link is in the show notes. And don't forget to check out the blog on personal resilience training, which talks about RAW, which is Wellbeing and Resilience at Work, the psychometric tool, and the link to my work-life balance course. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you next week where I'm talking to Olivia Mendoza about addiction recovery and art to heart healing. Until the next episode, take care. Bye. Thanks for listening to the Diverse Minds podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you access your podcasts from. You can also connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Tune into next week's episode of the podcast, where I'll bring you more insights on mental health and inclusion. Bye for now.